So once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And I'll just quickly run through an agenda. And then after the agenda, we will give introductions so you can just kind of know who is talking to you. So that's the first thing on our agenda will just be some quick introductions. And then we'll go into a technical interviews overview. That will be like a step-by-step on how to approach technical questions in interviews. Then we'll have a practice technical question, and then we'll close out with some interview prep resources and open Q&A at the end. So definitely, as you're kind of listening to all the things throughout the presentation, feel free to put any questions in the chat. And Matthew will be our chat moderator who will be answering any questions he can, as well as saving some questions for the end. So keep that in mind. Super quick introduction on myself. So my name is Miguel Chucaralao. I'm a university recruiter here at Microsoft, specifically for our HSI Hub. So the HSI Hub at Microsoft are a few key schools in California, Texas, Florida, and also includes the country of Puerto Rico. And they are schools that have, of course, higher populations of Hispanic, Latinx students, and also are legally defined as HSIs. So the year I graduated, May of 2019 from Bentley University. Bentley University is a pretty small school in the greater Boston area. It's about 20 minutes north of Boston. The Boston area was really a fun place to go to school. So actually, you guys are in Florida, so Miami, definitely way more fun to go to school there. But Boston is cool too. A lot of cool schools up there, a lot of college people, but I'm sure Florida might actually be more fun to go to school in because you don't have snow. My purpose at Microsoft is to provide opportunities for talented, motivated, and diverse candidates to achieve their dreams. So that is the main reason I became a recruiter. Is I realized that as a recruiter, you can give people opportunities. And I think that for me, I'm very thankful for the individuals who gave me an opportunity throughout my, college career. And I was able to get to Microsoft because of a recruiter giving me that opportunity. So I would say that that's kind of the thing that brings me fulfillment is giving that same opportunity to people who have also just overcome a lot of obstacles in their lives. And a fun fact, I don't know when my real birthday is, so I was born in Ecuador, and that's the reason why. Is I was born in Ecuador on a farm, not in a hospital. So because of that, my mom actually had to take me a few days after I was born to register me and get a birth certificate. And when she registered me, the day that they put on the birth certificate is the day that she registered me, not the day that I was born. So the birth certificate I have is a little bit off in terms of when I was actually born. And then next, I believe we have Chris, if I can get this slide to go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm a software engineer on the Azure Portal team. Azure Portal is the interface that everyone uses to manage their cloud resources on Azure. I graduated in spring of this year, and I started in Microsoft at August. I graduated from UCF. And I got 2 degrees, one in computer science and one in political science. My purpose at Microsoft is to make the cloud management experience reliable, fast, and enjoyable. The team that I am on in Azure Portal is responsible for monitoring the portal, detecting errors, and letting our developers know how they can improve their experiences on Portal. And my fun fact is I was the president of Night Hacks last year, and I led last year's hackathon. I'm excited to talk to you all today about tech interviews, and it's great to see you all.
Thank you, Chris. And then last but not least, we have Matthew.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Matthew Villegas. I'm a software engineer in the Azure Edge engineering platform static analysis team, a little bit of a mouthful. I graduated last spring, May 2020. So that was a fun time, kind of last semester transitioning into lockdowns and pandemic. Very interesting time to graduate. My purpose at Microsoft is to enable other developers to enjoy developing software productively and securely. So my team, we handle basically developing software for other developers. So our whole job is to enable other developers to make sure that, the stuff they're doing is secure by running static analysis checks, but also that it isn't cumbersome. So they really can just focus on what they need to do and have a good time doing it without being bogged down, but making sure that everything is secure. And a fun fact about me is I played the trombone. I played it for a lot of years, and I brought it over with me when I moved to Seattle. So as Miguel said earlier, also I'll be moderating the chat, so I'll answer some questions there, and I'll pass them over to Chris if they're kind of more relevant for Chris to answer. But yeah, I look forward to kind of engaging with you guys and seeing what you have to say. So thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thank you, Matthew. And I envy that. I've been trying to teach myself how to play guitar for like 3 years now, and I do not spend enough time practicing. So hopefully one day we'll have a little jam session. But for now, what I'll kind of walk through a little bit here is just some general overview when it comes to topics covered in interviews. This is, of course, a little bit more tied to like Microsoft interviewing, but at the same time, it's also very general, where I'm sure a lot of this does apply at other places. Like, yes, some of the things listed here tie in with Microsoft's cultural attributes and the way we do things. But if you bring these things to any interview, I'm pretty sure it'll go well. So the first thing you'll see at the top there is passion. I would say passion for technology, passion for the company that you're interviewing for. So whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Apple, Google, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, right? You want to be passionate about not only technology, but what that company is doing. So I would say a really important thing to do there is doing your research. You want to take some time to actually look at the company's values, the mission statement. What are some of the cool things that they're doing now? What are some of the cool things that they're going to do in the future? To give you an example, like something you might look at with Microsoft is like the sustainability efforts. There's even an AI for Earth team at Microsoft that I didn't know about until this like last summer. And I was like, oh, we have a whole team that's using AI to like better the planet and for sustainability purposes. So things like that, where you kind of dive a little deeper into what the company is doing, and then you can bring that passion. Like if you're passionate about sustainability, you can talk about that in your interview where the company ties in with your passion. Problem solving, that one is going to be something that Chris is definitely going to cover a lot during the tips for interviewing, but problem solving, a really big piece of that is to be collaborative. So it's really, really easy to be quiet during the interview, especially when you get that technical problem and you're like, okay, I just need some time to think. Like, let me get a few minutes and let me just think about how I'm going to solve this. But the interviewer wants to know what you're thinking. And I think that's the important piece there is as you're problem solving, you want to still be collaborative and talk about what you're thinking inside your head, talk about what you're writing, or you're not whiteboarding in person right now, but talk about what you're writing maybe on a virtual whiteboard or writing within the virtual IDE. And then that way that interviewer has a good idea of how you approach problems and the way that you handle them. So think about that. Culture. Again, that kind of does tie a little bit with doing your research. So you want to make sure that you know what the culture is like. So for example, at Microsoft, you can look up like the cultural attributes and the 5 pillars that make up Microsoft's culture, which a really big one is the growth mindset. And that kind of brings us to that last point there, which is willingness to learn. So the growth mindset and willingness to learn, in my opinion, sound very, very similar or have a very similar definition. And the large part of it is that you're always continuously looking to take not only risk, but learn from the risk that you're taking. So you're trying to continue to, in a way, develop and keep like trying something new and trying something in a different way, right? Where you're like, hey, this may be better, it may not be better, but I want to try it. I want to see what's going to happen when I try this. It could potentially be 100 times better. It might fail, but I want to try it because I want to continue to help us develop and grow, right? So that's where that growth mindset comes in, that you want to grow as an individual, you want to help the company grow as an individual, but also that you want to help the people around you grow. I think that's another really important distinction there is that, like, yes, we want you to have your own individual accomplishments where you're building these amazing things and you're doing amazing things, but you also want to be a collaborative person or a team player, that you're also helping the people around you also succeed. Because if the team is succeeding and you're succeeding, that's way better than just you succeeding and the team not succeeding. So keep that in mind as well. And then now I will pass it back to Chris, who will just be walking you through some of the step-by-steps on how to actually approach technical questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Miguel. So before I kind of jump in, I want to make a confession for everybody. I still get nervous at tech interviews. It's normal to be nervous, I think. And if you need to, especially if you're doing a phone interview, if you need to, like, before you start, once you get the question, like, take a breath. I recommend that you do that if it helps you. But don't feel bad if you get nervous about tech interviews. It's a totally different skill set than like regular interviews. So it's normal to feel nervous. Can you go to the next slide, please? Awesome. So when you first get the question from your interviewer, make sure you want to make sure that you have a full understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve. And so one recommendation is to summarize or repeat the problem back. This makes sure that like you didn't mishear the interviewer. And it also makes sure that you understand the problem if you're able to restate it in a different way. And then it also like shows that you're able to summarize information that you're given. Another step is to ask clarifying questions. You want to make sure that you're not making any assumptions that your interviewer doesn't also share. And you want to make sure that you understand the bounds of the problem. For instance, like one bound could be, or one constraint could be like this solution for this problem is designed to be run on like an embedded system. And so you have very little storage space. So you need to limit the number of variables that you use. You need to have a low space complexity. This solution needs to be really scalable. And, if it takes 30 seconds for this algorithm to run per user, then that won't work. So you want to make sure that you understand any constraints before you jump into the problem. A second thing that you can do when you're asking clarifying questions is ask for sample input. This is really helpful, because you may, number one, it will help you to think of edge cases because your interviewer may give you like a sample input that you hadn't thought of, but also you want to make sure that like you have an understanding of the problem and you're not you're not having wrong assumptions. I mentioned identifying possible inaccurate consumptions. So like the example here is like, is the input already sorted? Another example could be like, do we need to accept negative numbers and also positive numbers? You may forget like that somebody could pass in negative numbers. So you want to make sure that you aren't making any assumptions that your interviewer doesn't also share. Next slide, please. Yes, and also you want to make sure that you're clearly communicating as you're moving through. And if you need to take a moment when you're first starting the problem, you can always say, hey, I'm taking a moment to write out my ideas on paper and then, or work through the problem a little bit on paper, and then talk about some of your possible solutions. So if you need a moment, that's fine, but make sure you communicate that to your interviewer. Also, I mentioned you want to write out some of your ideas. So if you're having a whiteboard, like maybe writing out some algorithms that you think might be useful in solving this problem, and writing out what are the pros and cons of each. This is also helpful because your interviewer is there to help you. Your interviewer may try to, like if you give maybe 3 or 4 different possible solutions, your interviewer may be able to help you narrow it down to one. So make sure that you're talking through your thought process with them because they're there to help you. When you're programming, choose the language that you are most comfortable in. Any C-based language should be fine. I mean, if you're writing out your solution in Haskell, maybe your interviewer might not know it, but like your interviewer should be familiar with like C-based languages. And so choose the one that you're most comfortable in. Make sure that you think about edge cases, and you should start to do this like when you're forming your solution. So like, for instance, how would you handle if you're being told that like you need to work with a set of numbers? Are they just integers? Are they natural numbers? Could you have negative input? Could you have like decimal numbers? Making sure that you understand all of the cases, even outside of the sample input that you get. Take a moment to think about how you could break your own solution. That's something that you can do here. And then lastly, you want to, of course, code your solution. Make sure that your code is readable. This is really important. And using comments here, like comments are always welcome. Pseudocode before you get started, you might want to write out your, before you get started actually coding, you might want to use some pseudocode to walk through your solution or a diagram to make sure that you and your interviewer are on the same page and that your interviewer knows what you're going to do. And another thing that I've noticed is an interviewer, when they're interviewing you, of course, they're interested in your technical skills. They're interested in knowing, are you going to be an effective coder? But they're also interested in, hey, how are you as a coworker? Are you able to communicate when you get stuck? Are you somebody who's pleasant to work with? Are you somebody who is going to be able to review several possible solutions collaboratively with someone else? Those are important considerations in your interview that you should try to show to your interviewer. Another thing before we move on is I think don't forget the behavioral components of the interview. A lot of interviews do have a behavioral interview as well. And one resource for this might be the Career Services Office, but make sure you think of some examples of common behavioral interview questions as well. And you're prepared to answer those based on your prior experience. What's a time that you encountered an obstacle in your work? What's a time that you had to stand up for something you felt was right? And those are some common ones. Make sure you have make sure you've given some thought to how you would respond to some of those common questions. Another possible question is, can you walk me through a project that you've already created? I've been asked this question before. This is actually really cool because your interviewer is able to learn about your own passions, but also you're able to kind of explain a problem space that maybe your interviewer wasn't familiar with, and also talk about some of maybe the different considerations that you had when building your solution. And then, of course, show your technical skill by walking through your previous project, and maybe even it's a specific tech stack that you're interested in, so you might feel more comfortable answering this question. Awesome. Next slide, please. Okay. You want to make sure that you want to make sure that you're testing your code. So what I like to do is I like to take a few of the test cases that I wrote out at the beginning of the interview with the help of the interviewer, and just trace through the code and make sure that nothing unintended happens. Make sure that you're also doing this with your edge cases too. If you have a problem with strings, if you pass in an empty string, is your code going to crash? Or if you pass in a null reference, is your code going to crash? Make sure that you're testing edge cases as well when you test your code. And lastly, you want to analyze the performance of your code. This is helpful also when you're comparing algorithms, to be able to say, I know that this algorithm runs in O of n, or I know that this data structure, one data structure has O of n lookup, and this other data structure has has constant time O of 1 lookup. So being able to talk about that at the beginning is really helpful when you're narrowing down what approach you should use to solve the problem, but also talking about it as you're going through and as you're optimizing your code. You can say this solution that I started out with was O of n, but I got it down to constant time, or I got it down to the square root of n, or something like that. So showing how different optimizations can improve the time or space complexity of your solution, that's really helpful in tech interviews. Lastly, it's okay to not know the answers immediately. Remember that your interviewer is there to help you. The questions are designed to be difficult, and I feel your interviewer is going to be more interested in seeing how you solve a question that you've never seen before, than you are just oh, this is the solution, I've seen this problem before. So the questions are designed so that you hopefully have not seen the question before, And it's also your interviewer, you want to make sure you're asking questions and communicating, because I mean, in several interviews, the interviewer has been really helpful and has directed me toward a solution when I've talked about several, or when I've talked about a question. This is also really helpful. Like, let's say that you are, in a situation where you just don't remember something about the language, like, or you want to say, like, I know, for instance, like, I know Java has some method for sorting, but I don't remember what it is. Can I just call a sort method here? Or I know that, or I know that Java has, or I know that C# has like a dictionary or some class, but I don't remember what package it's in. Can I just call dictionary here? Making sure that you're talking through your assumption with your interviewer, but don't allow those things to get you stuck. I think most interviewers are more interested in your thought process than they are like your syntactical ability. Although knowing language pretty well is still important. As you're going through, like I mentioned, you want to be optimizing your solution. So if you start out with a solution like that has poor runtime, that's okay. I think a good process is try to get a solution, even if it's not optimal at first, and then go through some methods of optimizing that solution. And then at the end of the interview, be able to talk about where you started and the runtime and space complexity of your start point, your first solution, and then be able to talk about the runtime of your optimized solution. That's really interesting to interviewers. Awesome. So now we're going to work on a practice technical question. And by the way, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or Q&A section. And Matthew will answer them, or we'll answer them at the end. So our technical question for today is: write a program that, given a number, will determine if it is a prime number. So when we're starting out, you want to make sure, like I said, that you're asking questions and that you're clarifying information, understanding definitions, and making sure that you don't have any assumptions not shared by your interviewer. Next slide, please. So let's clarify the definition of a prime number. I would probably state to my interviewer, after restating a summary of the question, just to make sure I understand what a prime number is. You're looking for a natural number greater than 1 that has no positive divisors other than 1 and itself. And after, you may even want to clarify like the definition of a natural number. Natural numbers, that's countable numbers, integers, not including negative numbers, correct? And your interviewer will be able to make sure that your assumptions match theirs. So you can also clarify the expected inputs and outputs of the program. So I would ask my interviewer maybe to provide some sample input, or I could say like, hey, so some expected input might be a number like an int, like 3 or 5 or 2 or 100, or even 0 or negative numbers. Should I be able to handle negative input if it's given to me? Because negative numbers are not prime. And then you would want to give expected output. So I would say, like, if I get a number 2, I should return true. If I get a number 3, then I should return true. If I get a number 4, then I should return false. Is that right? And your interviewer would be able to make sure that you understand the problem because you were communicative and you clarified your assumptions. Next slide, please. Okay, so now you want to come up with your algorithm. And like I said, it's totally okay to say, hey, can I have a moment to work through the problem a little bit before you determine like the set of solutions that you want to think of. So when I thought of this problem, the first thing that occurred to me is trial division, right? So for instance, you have a number and like you have a number and you want to make sure that no number smaller than that number can divide that number. And if no number can divide that number, then can divide it evenly, that is, then it's a prime number. And if not, if you find a number that's able to divide that number, then you have found a non-prime number, and you want to return your output accordingly. So our algorithm would be like, because 0 and 1 are non-prime, we would return false. So let's check those first. If the number is 2, we would return true. And then starting at 3 to a given number, the number that we're passing in, if we find the divisor of the number other than itself, we want to return false. So we'll be doing this in a loop, and then otherwise we'll return true. I would want to explain this to my interviewer before I even start writing code. And writing out some pseudocode like this is really good. Just like in sentences, like if the number is 2, return false. It's less than 2, return false. If the number is 2, return true. This is really good to make sure that your interviewer understands the solution that you intend to use, and also they can maybe give you some let you know some red flags if they see them, or if you've misunderstood the problem, they can help you get back on track. So we can test the solution with some of our sample input. And I would do this on paper, tracing through the code, or on the whiteboard, tracing through the code to make sure that your solution actually works, and make sure that you're using your edge cases here. You see that we have in our sample input -10 and 0 to be able to handle those edge cases that we thought of in the beginning. So once you started out with your first solution, and this is a non-optimal solution, let's think about the runtime here. We have to test every single number between the 0 or between 3, and the number that we're passing in. So that would be a runtime of O of n. So that's it's okay, but we can do better. So let's think about how we could improve this algorithm. Next slide, please. So one improvement that we can do is, we know that even numbers, those are non-prime. So this whole time we've been climbing up, testing numbers for numbers that we know for a fact are non-prime. So we can first test that the number that we're passing in, is it an even number, then greater than 2, that is, we should just return false right away. Another thing that we should do is we are going all the way up to the number that we're testing. We are iterating all the way up to the number that we're testing. But actually, we only need to iterate up to the square root of the number that we're testing. Does anyone know why this is? Maybe shout it out in the chat if you know. Okay, so the reason we only need to go up to square root is because numbers above square root are yeah, exactly. So George, so we only need to go, numbers above the square root are not going to be able to evenly divide the number. We also can skip over the numbers that we've already checked in our iteration. So we started out with this algorithm on the left, and next slide, please. We can put these improvements in our algorithm. So in the first highlighted section, we can just check right away if the number is even, we can return false, and that saves a ton of time because we're not iterating over the entire search space for numbers that we can very easily check. Is it prime? Because is it even? Then what we can do is we can skip over even numbers when we're iterating. So we can start. I'm sorry. Yeah, skip over even numbers. So we can start at 3 and iterate by 2 rather than iterating by 1, and we can stop searching when we hit the square root of the number. And this has brought down our runtime a lot because we started out with a solution that was O of n in our worst case, O of n, And now we have a solution that is O square root of n. So this is much better. And being able to communicate that, like that runtime improvement to your interviewer is really helpful. So here is our solution that we've coded up together, or that you will have coded up in your interview. And there's actually some ways that we could improve this code as well, but some things I want to call out before we think about that. I think that the person who coded this up did a good job of making it readable. So they've used, first of all, like method names that are, it makes it clear what is what the method is doing. Clear naming is really helpful. Also, like making clear variable names, as well as they've used comments to illustrate what they're doing. That's really helpful for an interviewer to be able to understand your code. And it also will help you to, when you're writing your code, to understand your own code. Commenting code, make sure that you understand what your code is doing. So it takes a little bit of time, but it can really help you when you're creating your solution. Some of the ways that some of the other kind of good things that the person who coded this up did is they used unsigned int, because they knew that we should not be dealing with or like negative numbers should not be are not prime. However, we should be checking the input for negative input and returning false, because what an unsigned int will do is actually remove the sign if you pass it in. So we should actually check. That should be a consideration. Like you might want to ask your interviewer, like, how should we handle negative input? Should we flip the sign, or should we like return false to begin with? So if I were improving this, I would first check. I don't know if I would use an unsigned int, or I would create another function is prime, where I'm passing in an int and then checking if it's negative and returning false. Otherwise, calling this imp is prime function. Another way that this could be improved, I think, is like where we have this if on towards the bottom, where we check if it's divisible using mod. That could be put into its own function, since we're only checking. We could create like an is divisible function. That would make the code more readable, in my opinion. Are there any other optimizations that people can see? Let me throw it out to the audience. Or Matt, if you have any.
I don't think I have any. I think the comments you added about making it a little bit more readable by checking divisibility and also handling primes would be, those are pretty good suggestions.
Awesome. Oh, Ahmed, that's a good suggestion, having an is even function. So maybe that would be a good solution here too, to make it more readable. Good suggestion. Awesome. Let's go to the next slide. So before I pass it to Miguel to talk about more interview prep resources, I'd like to talk about how the resources I found most important for prepping for an interview. First of all, work really hard in your data structures and algorithms classes. That is like the starting point for learning the algorithms that are and data structures that are most helpful in interviews. Like some that I like to keep in the back of my mind are like hash sets or hash maps. Those are really good interview tools. So make sure, I felt like at UCF, this is CS1 and CS2. That sequence of classes is the data structures and algorithms class. Make sure that you work really hard in these classes, study really hard, and it will really pay dividends when you are doing these interviews, interview prep. A second thing is try to space out your interview prep if possible. So it's just like studying for a test, right? You want to be studying consistently over the course of a semester for your midterm. Cramming the night before, even though I did it, is not a good way of studying for your exams. I mean, I did better when I studied consistently over semester versus when I studied last minute. And it works the same for interview prep. Maybe doing like one practice problem a week, if you're studying, if you know that you're having interviews like next year or like in a few months, doing 1 or 2 problems, maybe every week, or even like every day, like maybe do a problem, is way better than spending the weekend before your interview, like freaking out, trying to do as many leak code problems as you can. Those are 2 of the 2 interview prep tips that I think were most helpful for me. And I'll pass it over to Miguel for the next slide.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chris. And I definitely agree that although sometimes studying the night before gets the job done, you can probably get the job done a lot better, and you'll be way less stressed out if you actually do, consistently put in that time to learn over time versus all in one night. So definitely take that advice, and you'll probably use or drink way less energy drinks as well if you take that advice. So what we'll be covering here, just some additional interview prep resources to keep in mind as you are starting to prepare. A few things that you'll see here. So we'll kind of just walk through that, the first 3 things across the screen there. So mock interviews, definitely take advantage of it, whether it is through a student org that you're a part of, whether it is through your career center, whether it's attending a company event that maybe someone is hosting, even just trying to find like online, I would say like maybe even on LinkedIn, like, hey, mock interviews happening with some company or some type of event. Definitely try to utilize that. It really does help you better prepare for when you're in that room or in that virtual meeting with an interviewer. It's definitely very different when you're kind of preparing by yourself versus when you are actually preparing with somebody else. And I think it will help you be better prepared. So definitely keep an eye out for mock interview opportunities. Take advantage of that. Treat it as if it is like a real interview, and it will help you continuously like improve. Resume updates. That's something that as you're doing things like this hackathon, you want to keep that in mind as well, as just continue to update your resume. But also when you update your resume, that's going to be something you should definitely review before you go into an interview. Because as Chris mentioned in the presentation, yes, technical questions are going to be a large part of the interview, but you also will get behavioral questions. So make sure that you're consistently updating your resume when you are doing a new project, you had a new internship, you did a new hackathon. Update that resume, and that way when you review it before an interview, you can know like, okay, these are some of the things that I want to highlight from my resume that I want to talk more in depth about. These are the ones that highlight my skills and abilities the most, and it's not going to be, again, something that you have to do like last minute before the interview, like, oh, let me update my resume. So keep that in mind. Career services, this is something that definitely try to utilize as much as possible. Some universities, a lot of universities have pretty robust career services in terms of like the people who are there to help you, but also different initiatives, resources that they have. And I think sometimes as students, we don't take advantage of that. I know for sure I did not take advantage as much as I should have with my university's career services, which I turned out all right, but probably would have been easier if I did take advantage of those career services and the help that they provided and resources. So keep that in mind as well, that there are resources at your school that can help you and take advantage of it. At the top there, you'll see a few things. So LinkedIn, the way I see it, is one of the most powerful networking tools. So you can reach out to hundreds, thousands, millions of people on there. I would say the best approach is probably going to be a little bit targeted with who you're trying to reach out to. But of course, you can reach out to people and ask for interview help as well. So if you are, for example, interviewing at Microsoft and there's somebody from your school that went to your school but has now made it to Microsoft or another really big tech company that you're interviewing for, you can reach out to them, right? You could say like, hey, I saw you went to UCF. I am interviewing for Microsoft next week or 2 weeks from now. I saw that you work at Microsoft. Do you have any tips or tricks that I could bring into the interview with me to also make it to Microsoft, right? So I would say like that's a really good way as well that you can learn a little bit more about some specific companies' interview processes. So reaching out to people who usually I would say like alumni are way more likely to respond, but you can also just reach out to anybody on LinkedIn. And as long as you add, I would say, a personalized note, it's probably going to make a really big difference when you actually took the time, like looked at a person's profile, write a personalized note, or like, hey, I think it's really cool that you did this or you've worked on this. I would, want to work here or work on this as well one day, and I have an interview, would you have any time to either help me out with some like tips, resources, or something like that, right? So LinkedIn, really good place to just talk to people in general. Books. So there are a few books there, Cracking the Coding Interview, Cracking the PM Interview, Cracking the Tech Career. So if you're a reader, definitely take some time, read some books. I think for people who are not readers and kind of want to take some time to learn through action, you also have sites that you can practice coding on. So LeetCode is probably one that you have all been using, or if you haven't been using, you probably want to start using it, and HackerRank as well. So just go on there, kind of practice in action, working through different problems at different difficulty levels. Continue to challenge yourself as well. I would say that's the other thing is, like, once you get comfortable working with problems at a certain difficulty, you don't want to just kind of continue working on those problems because you're like, okay, I'm comfortable in this space. You want to continue to challenge yourself, and you may not even necessarily get a question that's as hard as something you've worked on in the past in your interview, but you know that you are better prepared if you do. But also the problem solving skills continue to evolve as you continue to challenge yourself in your problems. And that's also something that's really important is your problem solving skills, not just can you get the question right. So keep that in mind as well. And then the last thing that you'll see there across the screen is actually a Microsoft Learning Path that is relatively new. It came out about, I would say, maybe 2 months ago at this point, maybe a little bit over 2 months. And it is called the Start in Tech as an Intern Learning Path. And you can go to that aka.ms/intern learning path, and it'll take you there. But what that learning path is essentially like a course, like a virtual or like an online course. And it has a bunch of different modules that take you through everything from like resume building to networking to interviewing. And it has just a ton of information and resources. There's some videos in there. I would definitely suggest taking a look at it. Of course, some of the stuff is a little bit more kind of geared towards like if you were interviewing at Microsoft, but it is also just general information that is going to be extremely helpful. So yes, some of the videos, of course, have like Microsoft stuff in them, but at the end of the day, it is going to help you just get into tech as an intern, or even if you are looking for full-time opportunities, I would say still check out the learning module. There's still a lot of different, or learning path. There's still a lot of different modules within the learning path that are going to be extremely relevant, even if it is, looking for a full-time opportunity versus intern. So I highly recommend checking that thing out. And I would say at the end of the day, as Chris emphasized, it really is about, putting that time, putting that effort in, and taking kind of consistently practicing and getting ready for the interview. And that is pretty much what we'll be talking about today. I would say this last section now is just for any questions that anybody has in the audience. Definitely feel free to ask anything, whether it's related to the technical interview process or whether it is related to just Microsoft in general. We are here to answer any and all questions if you have them.
Omar is asking, is the Microsoft internship program still looking for candidates?
Yeah, so Microsoft is definitely still interviewing, hiring at internships, full-time opportunities. The bulk of recruiting happens in the fall season, so that's definitely something. And yeah, this is for summer of 2022. So Microsoft, at least here in the US, is just summer internships. Outside of the US, I know in Canada they do like co-ops that are like off season in like fall and stuff, but at least here in the US, it is just summer internships. So this is for summer 2022. But yes, we still are interviewing, hiring. Definitely do not let that dissuade you now that it is a little bit kind of deeper into the fall season. I would still highly suggest applying, and you still have pretty good odds because we still are doing a lot of hiring.
Two asks, if I graduate May 2022, can I still qualify for an internship for the summer? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. You would be looking for full-time positions, right?
That is correct, Chris. So if you have at least one semester or more remaining after you complete your internship, so if you were to do a summer 2022 internship, you need to have at least one semester left after you finish the summer internship. If you do not, then at that point, you are looking at full-time opportunities. So full-time opportunities is for anybody who's graduating in summer of 2022 or has graduated within the last 12 months.
Also, I want to echo Matthew's answers to these questions in the chat and make sure people see them. One person asked, if I fumble the solution but get close to it, does that mean that all failure interviewer have a lower chance to pass it? And he says not necessarily, and I totally agree. The interviewers are interested in seeing your thought process. So if you're able to clearly explain it and you get close to the solution, even if you don't get quite there, I would still say that you had a pretty successful interview. Another question from the Q&A section was, I'm not the fastest coder. Sometimes it can take a bit for my brain to get the problem. Do I still have a shot at getting a sweet internship? And like Matt says, he says, absolutely, the interviewers are interested in seeing how you think, not necessarily how fast. Make sure you're clearly communicating as you think through the problem to the interviewer. Yes, I definitely agree. I just wanted to highlight those two answers. I thought they were really good. Mark is asking, how many of the technical questions does one usually get? In my experience, when I did my, when I had my phone or my first round interview, it was a pretty short interview, like 30 minutes. And I think I was only given one problem, but it was a bit larger to solve. And for when I did my internship interview, actually, it was back in the day when things were in person. I flew out for my interview. I actually had, I think, 2 rounds. Sorry. I had one coding interview where it was, I think, an hour long, and I had like 2 questions. And then the second interview was an entirely behavioral interview. I do think, though, that for full-time offers, at least when it was in person, I noticed that they were doing like 4 interviews for full-time. I'm not sure how that's changed for remote for final round, but I would say during the process, I answered like 3 coding questions.
Yeah, so it definitely still is pretty consistent to what your experience was, Chris. It's for interns, it usually can range from 2 to 4 interviews. So there needs to be at least 2 interviews conducted for an intern, but it can go all the way up to 4. Sometimes it really just has to do with interview availability. So sometimes we don't have enough 4 interviewers from that team to carry out interviews, but we need to have at least 2 interviews carried out. So some people might see that they had 2 interviews. Some people might have 3 or 4. For full-time roles, you will see at least 3 and sometimes, again, 4. It does have a little bit to do with interviewer availability. So just keep that in mind, that your interviews might be a little bit shorter. Each one will be 45 minutes long, and you'll have a 15-minute break in between rounds. But you might have 2 hours of interviews versus 4 hours of interviews, but definitely just be prepared. And you will know ahead of time. It won't be like the day of that it's surprise, you have 4 interviews, or surprise, you only have 2. It will be something that when you get logistics, usually about 24 to 48 hours beforehand, they'll let you know how many, what time, and all that.
Awesome. Somebody's asking, do we need a suit or professional uniform for the interview? No. My interviewers were in t-shirts, and formal attire was not expected. I think the guideline is dress how you would be comfortable. So as long as you look presentable, I think that you should be good there. I did, for my interview, dress up a little bit. I had a collared shirt, but not anything I definitely did not wear a suit for my Microsoft interview. But I just did that because it helped me to feel more comfortable for my interview. Definitely dress comfortably for your interview. I would not wear it. You do not need to wear a suit, or it is not expected for you to wear a suit. Alan asks, are there any IT internships, or are you only looking for software engineers?
So there are internships as well, and something that we call services, and services would be, for example, it would be customer engineers, support engineers, and that is a little bit more on the IT side. So they're not, the customer engineer and support engineers are more customer facing, where they're not building like Microsoft products per se. They're more so helping clients, and these clients are, really big clients. It's not like you're helping the average person who like can't figure out how to turn on their like Windows computer. It's like you're helping these really big companies, whether it's like Chipotle or Cliff Bar or GNC, like these really big companies, are also universities. Some universities use Microsoft products and solutions. So you're helping these clients that have, hundreds, thousands of users. And when they have issues, you're the person that they come to. So there are internships in that space. The thing that I would say is for internships in the services space, you need to apply really early on. So I know that they are kind of finishing up recruiting in the services space, and they probably will be done at the end of the fall. So I would still say, like, if the job posting is up, which I believe it is, definitely apply, but it is something that you want to continuously think about applying as early as possible, because, like, for example, in the services space, they do way less recruiting than like software engineering. So it doesn't take as long.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yes, there's one. Do you have to be an active Windows user to intern at Microsoft? Does it increase your chances of landing the internship? Not particularly. I did not have to answer any Windows-related questions in my interview. Of course, I mean, it's helpful to like know what the products are. For example, I had an interview question where my interviewer was like, suppose you're trying to make this feature for Microsoft Word, like, what would your approach be? So it does helpful to have like an awareness of what the products are. And also it will be helpful for you when you like are being placed to know what your interests are. So like, are you interested in working on like the enterprise, like the software, like Office products? Are you interested in operating systems? Are you interested in cloud? So having an awareness of like what the products are and having an idea of where you might like to be placed is helpful. But no, Windows is not required.
And I will add on to that too. Like, Microsoft is such a large company. There's so many different products that you work on that, you won't even necessarily get like a Windows laptop to work on. Like, there are plenty of teams that they get Macs, or there are plenty of teams that work with Linux. So there's a lot of different opportunities for you to work with a technology that you're interested in or you're comfortable with. Like in some places, for example, I work in Windows. So having a Windows laptop, pretty useful if I'm working in Windows. But that's not necessarily the case for every single organization. There's a lot of products, like there are people who work on Word for Apple devices, right? So they usually work on Macs, and they can test on Macs. So stuff like that. So it's a large company. There's a lot of opportunities for you to use something that you know or try out something new.
Yeah, actually, my office mate works on the mobile app, the Azure mobile app. So he has a Mac to be able to run iOS.
I think we did it. I think we answered them all.
Hooray!
Well, we will go ahead and just finish up this presentation, which is just one more slide here. And this slide is just going to be, if you are interested in any of these opportunities at Microsoft, whether it's software engineering, you can check out that link. PM, hardware, all of these links have a ton of information on opportunities in the respective space, but also you can find the direct links to apply to those opportunities, internship, full-time, the links are in there. There's also interview prep information in there as well, information on the recruiting process and timeline, frequently asked questions are in there as well. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. I would highly recommend checking it out if you are, like I said, interested in any of the opportunities in these spaces. And then besides that, the very, very last thing I will say is just thank you so much to everyone for joining us here today, engaging with us, and you can check out the Microsoft career site for all open opportunities.
Awesome. I'll also be if you're in the Discord and you have some questions later, I'll be mentoring, and you can put your questions in the Microsoft channel. I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, I'll be in the Discord as well. You'll find me as Matt V in there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.